Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of Bro Politics. It is my hope that you're fine wherever you are. I'm also okay. Ladies and gentlemen, today I want us to cross the border to the great nation of Tanzania. As you know, Tanzanians went to the poll on 29th of this month. That is 29th of October 2025. Unlike their previous polls, however, this particular one has seen chaos, especially in their major cities like Dar es Salaam. As usual, Kenyans are weighing in, with some trending the events in Tanzania as if it was their day job. Ladies and gentlemen, most of the time, I'm extremely careful to talk about our neighbors. And there is a reason behind it. Our circumstances are not the same. And until we understand that, it is very difficult to come up with an objective analysis of what is going on, even in Tanzania, for instance. The circumstances in those countries are different from ours. Their realities are different. Kenya is surrounded by several countries. But when it comes to elections and democracy, Kenya might be having a different play altogether. If you went to our neighbor Uganda, for instance, they've had one president for over 30 years. Every election, they have chaos with the opposition fighting and being cracked down on. But the president remains one. In Southern Sudan, even though it's a young nation, they are barely having elections there. Now, as a Kenyan, you will sit here and judge them. You would sit here and condemn Museveni and call him names. You would go to talk about Ethiopia and say that Ethiopia is just a monarchy with some sub-monarchs ruling the country. You would look at Somalia and laugh at them and say, what's so difficult governing a country? Of course, you look at Rwanda and wonder, how can a president get over 90% of the votes, yet they are competing with 6 people? How is that even possible? You will be laughing at the people of Burundi as a banana republic. And of course, now you would be an expert on what is happening in Tanzania. The point is, until you understand the dynamics of each and every country I've mentioned, you are not suitable to comment on their way forward. And I usually give an example. According to Americans, democracy, their version of democracy, is what should work virtually everywhere. But the result of them forcing democracy, especially in the Arab world or Middle East, has not worked. Iraq is barely governable. Libya is ruined. It's not a country you could talk of anymore. And these are places that America believed that the best thing was to remove the dictator and allow them to have elections. It doesn't work that way. In most cases, you need to understand the circumstances of a country before you can make an objective analysis or even make an objective proposal. Let's go to Tanzania, for instance. Tanzania has over 100 tribes, yet Tanzania has been very united. It is almost impossible to hear of ethnic conflict in Tanzania, even between the Christians and the Muslim minority in that country. Tanzania has been, in terms of unity, a country of reference. In fact, those of us in Kenya who wake up tribal and sleep tribal have always been referred to emulate Tanzanians. They have been told that Undugu united these people. So the question is, why are they now on the streets destroying property. What's going on? What has happened? There are two ways of looking at it. One, we go with what the opposition there was saying, especially those who did not participate in the election, led by Chadema. Their argument was no reforms, no election. So they wanted reforms that are related to the elections in that country. One of the reforms they wanted was a change of the law that prohibits someone from contesting election results. In Tanzania, you cannot go to court to try and protest the election of an opponent. So it's unlike Kenya, you go to the polls. If you lose, you go to court. The court might even dismiss that election. In Tanzania, it is not so. And so the opposition led by Chadema were very interested in changing that law so that they can at least contest or protest should they feel that the elections were not fair. And you can't blame them because in the elections of 2020, Magufuli won that election with over 80%. But there is one interesting part here. Chadema, which was the main opposition, only managed to get one parliamentary seat if you exclude the women's seat. Only one parliamentary seat. And because in that country you cannot challenge election results, you have to wait until the next election. So it was understandable for them to demand changes. But then for you to amend the constitution, you will need a process. It cannot be amended by demanding that it be amended. There is a process of amending the constitution, which might even lead to a referendum. So that did not happen before 29th of October. So people went to the election without that reform. If we are to go with what they're saying, then the chaos in Tanzania is purely people saying, we said we are not going to an election without reforms. And yet you went ahead to do an election. For that reason, we are now rebelling, especially members of the opposition. So fine, that is one way of looking at it. But what if there is more? What if there is the real reason why people are on the streets and are destroying property in Tanzania? What if there is another reason? You know why I think there could be another reason? Because I have followed the elections in Tanzania, and they have not been what you would call, according to Kenyan standard, free and fair. You need to know that Chama cha Mapinduzi, CCM, has led that nation since independence. Getting the CCM ticket in Tanzania is equivalent to being elected president. Like I said, Chama cha Mapinduzi has led that country since independence, and they have won every election since independence. Even when Edward Lowassa, the founder of Chadema, went against Magufuli, he lost miserably. There were no chaos to the level we are seeing now. There have been protests here and there. There have been claims ever since of election malpractice. The opposition has always claimed that their elections were rigged, that there was no fairness at all in terms of how the elections were conducted, especially in regions where the opposition had an upper hand. So there has never been an election in Tanzania where they all, especially where the opposition is involved, where the opposition said the election was fair. No, they have always said that Chama cha Mapinduzi has been mismanaging elections or rigging elections, for lack of a better term. But we've not seen chaos on the street. You can't even say that these are new crop of people. The last election was in 2020. That is barely 5 years ago. So these are the same individuals. The same individuals on the street perhaps would have voted for Magufuli. Magufuli, like I told you, won with over 80%, and he was one of the most popular person there. Even though the elections were not fair, the people did not go to the streets to burn things and destroy property. So what is happening? You can't tell me that because there is no reform to this particular law, people are now on the street. Why were they not on the street just 5 years ago? Because there were no such reforms. And even then, Tundu Lissu competed against Magufuli and he demanded such reforms. So why didn't they go to the street? Why were they not destroying their properties? If you asked me, this thing is all about the agreement between Tanganyika and Zanzibar. And I want us to look at it from that angle, because this one is not convincing enough. Circumstances have not changed, yet we are seeing disproportionate violence. So, in my opinion, I think the issue at play here is the feeling that the agreement between the Tanzania mainland and Zanzibar is not holding. So what is this agreement? As you know, Tanzania is a union. You have Tanganyika and you have Zanzibar, or let me say the mainland and the island. The island is autonomous. They have their president, Mwinyi, who was re-elected, by the way. That Mwinyi got 74% of the votes. They have their judiciary in Zanzibar, and of course they have their parliament. But they sent some MPs to Dodoma, to the Tanzanian parliament. And mostly there are parties also that Chama cha Mapinduzi is the party there. So ladies and gentlemen, the agreement is Zanzibar, you will have your own president, you will have your own judiciary, you will have your own parliament. You will do most of your things on your own, but we are united. An example would be how the United States is. Because in the United States, you have 50 states. These states have their, what you would call president, the governor, they have legislature, they have the Congress, they have their Senate, but all these also respond and respect the federal laws. So in different states, they have different laws, they decide on what to do, and even the federal government cannot force them to do otherwise. Since Nyerere, the mainland has produced the president for the United Tanzania. Zanzibar will always have their president. But the president of the union has always come from the mainland because of size and resources and other things. Unfortunately, Magufuli died in office, and the deputy, the vice president, was Suluhu Hassan. There were attempts to rectify the problem by making sure that the prime minister took over as the president, but then one thing led to the other, and Suluhu Hassan was declared the president. Now, Suluhu Hassan comes from Zanzibar, meaning for the first time, Tanzania were having a president of the union from Zanzibar. Now, there are those who are arguing that Ali Hassan Mwinyi was also from Zanzibar. No. If you check, you'll find that he was from Pwani, which is part of the mainland. The point is, all the leaders, all the presidents from Nyerere to Hassan Mwinyi, to Mkapa, to Kikwete, to Magufuli, all of them have come from the mainland. And problems began, in my opinion, when, I think in an attempt to consolidate power, the current president, Her Excellency Dr. Samia, decided to get rid of people she thought could replace her. And so this might have angered the powers that be. even within CCM. Because, like I said, it doesn't make sense that they would be banning things and demanding that Suluhu must be out of power on issues of reform when they didn't do so barely 4 years ago. They were complaining, but they never went to ban things or claim that they wanted to overthrow the person through a civilian coup. What is at play here is the people of Tanzania mainland feeling that they are being controlled by the people from Zanzibar. I don't think it has anything to do with the president's gender. I don't think so. That the people of Tanzania will not want to be governed by a woman, I don't think that is the issue. What I think is the issue is that they don't want a president of the union to come from Zanzibar. And until they find a way to correct that, every other excuse that is being used will just be an excuse. Eventually, that particular country will need to reset and go back to the original agreement, I think, that Nyerere had, that Zanzibar will be autonomous with their president, but the president of the union will come from the mainland. That, ladies and gentlemen, in my opinion, is what could be causing this, because nothing else, in my opinion, explains the conflict, the anger you are seeing with the people. And I've also had an opportunity of speaking with a few friends from Tanzania, and some of them agree that the issue here has descended to a Zanzibar versus Bara war. Okay? It has descended to that, to Zanzibar versus Bara. So, ladies and gentlemen, that is what I wanted to share with you. That is my opinion. I think that is what is going on. And like I said, these neighbors of ours have different challenges. And until we understand what is going on there, at times we just need to be quiet. It doesn't hurt. I just shared this because I don't find sense in people saying that they are willing to burn their country down if a law is not changed. Yet they know how that law can be changed and they know the process. So there must have been something behind the scenes. And in my opinion, it is that feeling that a Zanzibari is now also the president of the union, which is against the agreement. If you think I'm making sense, let me know. But if also you disagree, let me also know in the comment section. Otherwise, if you want to know what is actually going on in Sudan, not Southern Sudan, Sudan, where they are fighting, watch this video.